the Gulf States newsroom. This is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm Kat Stromquist, chopping it up this week. On today's show, troubled waters. Plans to deal with flooding in Mississippi are upsetting people downstream in Louisiana. And a multi-billion-dollar project meant to restore some of Louisiana's coastline has been sent back to square one.
Here we are 20 years from Hurricane Katrina, when we've started thinking big and really started moving aggressively on building these big projects, and now we are back to ground zero.
That's all coming up on the Gulf States Gumbo. The Mississippi River tends to get all the attention. But today we're talking about a different river causing trouble top to bottom. The Pearl River flows from the heart of Mississippi through Jackson and down into southeastern Louisiana. For more than 100 years, that river has flooded in northeast Jackson. One flood in 2018 caused more than $1 billion in damages. Another one, 3 years ago, overwhelmed a water treatment plant. That cut off residents from clean tap water for nearly 2 months. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been trying to stop that flooding for years, but each plan has caused backlash and concern from Jackson down to Slidell, Louisiana. So to talk with us about both the history and future plans for this river, we have former Mississippi Public Broadcasting reporter and new WWNO reporter, Michael McEwen. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Kat. Good to see you.
So you've covered the Pearl River from Jackson for years. Just how bad has the flooding problem been there?
So the Pearl flooding in Jackson has really been one of the more defining environmental stories in that area, as you mentioned, for more than a century. It's been especially bad in the past 10 or so years. Some listeners probably remember the Jackson water crisis in 2022. That was a direct result of that flooding, but in addition to the water crisis, the Pearl has several tributaries, I believe 12 in Jackson. Many run through low-income, predominantly Black communities. And the flooding there was destructive, displaced many, and many now are fearful of what the next one will mean and if they'll have to leave.
Okay, this sounds like a serious concern. How come nothing's been done about it until now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Essentially, this project is mandated and operated by the Army Corps of Engineers, who legally is the operator of the Pearl River. They are funded by Congress. They have guidelines set out by Congress for projects that they construct. And in about 50 years, this project, across many iterations, has never met either cost-benefit ratio requirements or has even proven to be a net positive, which is what is required for Congress to fund this project.
Now, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does think its plans will deal with flooding and released revised versions of those plans last month. Here's some reporting from Mississippi Public Broadcasting's Shamira Muhammad on the mixed reaction to those plans up in Jackson.
The Army Corps One Lake project was created to address flood risk in northeast Jackson. The Corps previously received more than 6,700 comments on versions of the project, which were discussed at 2 public meetings in Jackson Thursday. Susan Gerard, the CEO of the Mississippi Children's Museum in Jackson, says she's in support of option D1, which would create a lake by damming the Pearl River.
This will create new access to the river that I know in Mississippi's largest educational and cultural attractions for children that is located on the banks of the Pearl River, that we can offer new educational opportunities.
The Army Corps predicts D1 could help protect more than 700 homes. But some residents are worried about the environmental impact the creation of the lake would have in Jackson and further downstream. Billy Mitchell is a board member of Pearl River Keeper.
The Corps planning document states that Plan D1 will cause major long-term negative impacts to fisheries and aquatic resources and destroy over 700 acres of rare wetland habitat, destroy 50 acres of public lands and wetlands at LaFleur's Bluff State Park.
Some residents also criticize the cost of D1, which is projected to be as much as $900 million. Lieutenant Colonel Jeremiah Gibson is the commander of the U.S. Army Corps Vicksburg District. He says the Corps is required to consider a non-structural option for the project, where the communities would need to become more resilient to flooding.
That looks like we want to elevate homes, we want to flood-proof places of work, but it doesn't prevent floods. It would require, if there's a medical emergency, emergency services from still having to use boats to access an elevated home where someone may have chosen not to evacuate.
The Corps is considering extending the public comment period on the project beyond its current August 18th deadline. Shamira Mohammed, MPB News.
Okay, so those are the issues up in Jackson. Mike, what are the concerns for this project downriver here in Louisiana?
Yeah, so the probably most interesting thing about the Pearl River is that it runs all the way from north of Jackson down to the Gulf, forms the border between Mississippi and Louisiana in its lower stretch. And this project, a lot of residents in Louisiana seem concerned that flood mitigation as it's being proposed in Jackson is not even addressing downriver concerns here in Louisiana. A lot of people in Louisiana apply their trade either on the Pearl River or in the swamps and wetlands that surround it.
And again, we have heard worries that business interests are overtaking actual flood prevention. What exactly is the story there?
A lot of very influential interests in the city of Jackson, be it the newly elected mayor, Jackson State University, the Chamber of Commerce, some museums that are influential in the cultural space in the city. They've all coalesced behind this project, and specifically the Army Corps' plan to construct this lake like that. And they're essentially saying this is the way to bring Jackson's economy back to where we want it to be. And that, in Jackson and downstream, has caused a lot of people to be suspicious as to whether the project is flood prevention or rather masquerading as it.
Lots of competing interests in the mix there. That was Michael McEwen, who covers the environment for WWNO and WRKF's Coastal Desk, and Shamira Mohammed, who's a reporter with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to the Gulf States Gumbo. I'm Kat Stromquist, and we're moving off the Pearl River onto the Mississippi and following it all the way down to the Louisiana coast. That's where the state is dealing with a decades-long land loss crisis. Louisiana has lost more than 2,000 square miles of coastal wetlands since the 1930s, and a multi-billion-dollar project to reclaim some of that has just recently been canceled. Joining us to tell us why is WWNO's Eva Tesfaye. Hey, Eva.
Hey, Kat.
So, Eva, what was this project?
Yeah, so the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion was a project that would have opened up a part of the Mississippi River to allow water from the river into Barataria Bay. And that water would carry sediment, basically sand and silt, into the bay, and that would build up over time. And eventually, vegetation would grow, animals would move in, and that would build into wetlands. It was a $3 billion project. We have other diversions on the river. This one would have been the biggest. It was considered the cornerstone of the Coastal Master Plan, and it was supposed to build around 30 square miles of new land over 50 years.
And why exactly is it so important to create more land on the coast?
Well, you mentioned that the state has lost nearly 2,000 square miles of coastal wetlands since the 1930s, and those wetlands, we've actually learned, do protect people from storm surges, and they also slow down hurricanes. So it's really important in that sense. And that land loss crisis has been caused by, there's a number of reasons for it. There is subsidence, sea level rise caused by climate change, but one of those reasons is the river used to build land along the coast before we engineered it and levied it. So this diversion would have tried to mimic the way the river used to naturally build wetlands and allow us to get more land on the coast. I spoke to Robert Twilley. He's a coastal scientist at Louisiana State University. His research on how the river builds wetlands informed the project.
Here we are 20 years from Hurricane Katrina, when we've started thinking big and really started moving aggressively on building these big projects, and now we are back to ground zero.
That's interesting. So why was the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion canceled by Governor Jeff Landry's administration?
Governor Jeff Landry has really made efforts to slow down the project since he got into office. And their official reasons for canceling the project were ongoing lawsuits. There were some lawsuits from oystermen in the parish and from Plaquemines Parish itself because the project would have increased flooding. Costs were rising. That's just partly due to inflation. The project was already funded by money from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill settlement. But, as it slowed down, costs started to rise more. And then the Army Corps of Engineers in April, after Governor Landry had already paused work on the project, the Army Corps decided to withdraw a permit. They also cited the same reasons, lawsuits, rising costs, but also they pointed out that there was a model that showed that the diversion wouldn't have built as much land as the model that they were going with. And that really started a social media firefight between Governor Jeff Landry and former Governor John Bell Edwards, where Landry accused Edwards of purposefully hiding the model. Edwards said they didn't hide the model. They didn't use it for a number of reasons, that it basically didn't consider a number of factors. But basically, there were a lot of things slowing down this project. And last month, the Coastal Restoration and Protection Authority officially canceled it and returned the money to the Deepwater Horizon Oil Spill Fund.
That was Eva Tesfaye. She covers the environment for WWNO and WRKF's Coastal Desk. Thanks for talking to us about that.
Thank you.
And now it's time for Gulf States Gems, our chance to brag about our region. And for that, we're bringing everyone back. Michael McEwen and Eva Tesfaye. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
So we've got two reporters covering the environment here, and I was thinking we'd do gems about the environment. Michael, let's start with you. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so hearkening back to my days in Mississippi, Panther Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. It's right on the beginning of the Delta, kind of between the bluffs and the flatland of the Delta. It's got a beautiful lake that runs through it that kind of functions as a river, ton of wetlands and forest. It's public land, which is always great. You can go out there and kind of enjoy it any way you want without seeing too many people.
Without seeing too many people, but will you see panthers?
That's the allegation. I've yet to see one out there, but tons of deer and gator and all sorts of good stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Eva, what's your Gulf States gem?
Mine is Kisatchie National Forest, which is in central Louisiana. And I wanted to pick this one because I feel like I talk to a lot of people in New Orleans and they don't know that we have a national forest. And that's crazy because it's huge. It's over 600,000 acres. There's so much you can do there, hiking, biking, camping. And there's actually one really fun thing that they have is they have an eagle nest cam. So you can go to their website and they have a YouTube channel where you can watch little baby eagles.
Little baby eagles.
Live.
I'm going to check that out as soon as we jump off. So you can see pictures of other Gulf States gems from across our region on our Instagram. And we also want to hear about a place you consider a gem, a restaurant, a natural park. Send us your suggestion. Email connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org. This week's show is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations, WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Again, I'm your host, Kat Stromquist. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.